Is creativity something that is more predicted by a person's genetics, or is it something that they can learn? What do you think? Is creativity something that a person is born with, or is creativity something that can be developed? Is it something that can be learned? Is it something that can be practiced? Is it something that can be improved? I'd like you to think about people that you know. Maybe people that you grew up with, maybe people that you're friends with currently, maybe it's somebody in your family that are particularly creative, right? Particularly creative generally, or particularly creative in a specific area. When I ask myself that question, when I give myself the direction to make that recollection, when I think back, a few people come to mind, and one of them is a friend who I went to high school with. And that friend is a guy whose name is Mike. And Mike has actually gone on to become quite a successful musician. He leads like an electronic music band who is quite renowned, and he does very well. Now, Mike really struck me back then, and still does strike me as someone who's very, very creative generally, and specifically in the area of music. He's also, done well in photography. He likes to be very creative. He's sort of a very open person, very artful, artistic sensibility. He also came from a musical family. He grew up playing cello, and his father was a violist. He played the viola, the string instrument, the viola, in the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Was Mike this creative? Was Mike this musical and musically creative? Was he that? Was that something that he inherited, or was it something that was more related to the musically rich home in which he grew up in which he grew up in? So that's a kind of question that we can ask. Is musical creativity, or creativity more general, is it something that we inherit? Is it innate, or is it something that is, more subject to the contexts, the environments in which we grow up and in which we live? And that's a question that we're going to explore here. What is heritability? How is heritability defined? Heritability refers to the influence of genes and genetics on a particular trait or a particular aptitude, a particular natural ability that we have. Now, genes are known to exert varying degrees of influence on different traits and different abilities, different aptitudes, different skills, different talents, right? For example, if we're going to talk about traits, something that scientific inquiry into genetics has determined is that some physical attributes, some physical traits are almost entirely dictated by genetics. For example, height. Height is something that is highly determined by our genetics. I can't take a course on height, right? I can, but it's not really going to impact how tall I am or how short I am. I can't practice height, right? I can't really do anything in order to improve my height by very much, right? So height is a trait that's largely heritable. Now, some aptitudes are dictated in part by genetics and in part by our environment. For example, I was talking about musicality before, but athleticism is one of these as well, right? So genes have varying degrees of influence on our traits and on our aptitudes, on our natural abilities. We talked about traits, and I've used the term aptitude here. There's a very well-known psychologist that we're going to refer to a lot in this course, and that psychologist, his name is Francois Gagne. Gagne defines an aptitude as a natural ability, right? It's a natural ability that is at least partially heritable, at least partially genetically influenced. And according to Gagne, there are varying levels of aptitude which are observable in children, right? So we could already see in childhood, that some individuals, some children have a higher degree of one aptitude or another aptitude. So, for example, musicality. Musicality is an aptitude. According to Gagne, musicality is a natural ability that has varying levels, right? And at least some genetic influence. Not to the same degree as height, but to some degree. Maybe it's moderate degree, maybe it's low degree, maybe it is a strong influence. But an aptitude is a natural ability that it is at least partially genetically influenced. So, is an aptitude more genetically influenced, or is it more contextually influenced? Musicality, the one that I referred to before in terms of my friend Mike. Is that more influenced? Is that aptitude, is it more influenced by our genes, by what nature provides? Or is it more determined by the context in which we find ourselves, in which we participate, and in which we grow up with? Is it more something that is nurtured by the people and the spaces in which we're in? This is a huge question that scientists have examined quite extensively. And heritability is often studied using a particular method which is known as behavioral genetics. It's known as the behavioral genetic approach, right? Heritability of given traits and aptitudes is often studied on twins. Now, with the twin studies, what happens is scientists compare identical twins and fraternal twins, right? Identical twins are twins that, share 100% of their genetic complement, 100% of their DNA. Whereas fraternal twins who are not identical, they share roughly 50%, which is substantially less than identical twins, right? Now, identical twins are the result of one ovum, one egg being fertilized by one sperm, but resulting in two children. So these are twins that come from and shared one egg, right? They shared one ovum, right? Identical twins, because they come from one egg, one zygote, they're called monozygotic twins, MZ. Now, fraternal twins, they are the result of a happy accident of children coming from two eggs, two ova that were fertilized by separate sperm, right? By separate sperm, and resulted again in two children. So behavioral genetics, these twin studies, they compare identical twins who have 100% the same genes, the same genetics, and fraternal twins who have roughly 50% the same genes because they came from either one zygote or from two zygotes. They're either monozygotic or dizygotic. So these behavioral genetic studies, they compare identical twins and fraternal twins, and they measure similarities and differences on specific traits and aptitudes. For example, height, or athleticism, or musicality, or creativity. So they measure genetics and they measure environments by looking at twins who are fraternal and twins who are identical. And often what these studies do is they look at twins who are separated at birth and then reunited in adulthood versus twins who were reared together, who grew up together. Of course, twins who are separated at birth and then reunited later in adulthood, they did not grow up in the same home, right? So twin studies, they measure the percentage of aptitudes, of natural abilities that are influenced by a combination of genetics, shared environmental influences, non-shared environmental influences, and of course, there's always a little bit of chance, luck, and errors in measurement. So most people know some twins, right? And most people, do you know any twins? If you remember growing up, were there any twins that were in the school that you were at, in any classes that you were at? I grew up with some twins. I remember in elementary school, there were girls in one of my classes. There was Karen and Maya were their names. Karen was in my class and Maya was in another class. And they were identical twins. Now, they shared 100% of the same genetics because they were, monozygotic, right? They were identical twins. And they had some shared environmental influences. They shared some contexts. They grew up in the same home. Now, twins, just like everybody else, also participate in non-shared contexts, in non-shared environment. And I remember that Karen and Maya, first of all, they were in different classrooms. Those were non-shared environments, right? There were different spaces. They had different teachers. They had different friends in those classes. Also, I remember that their parents took great care to make sure that they had different activities that they participated in so that they would develop their own unique and distinct personalities. So you see, twins have varying degrees of genetic influence depending on whether they're identical or fraternal. They also have some shared environmental influence and some non-shared environmental influence. Twins in general that are separated at birth, they don't have very much shared environmental influences because they were raised in different homes. They most likely went to different schools, right? But twins who are reared together, they have both a high degree of shared environmental influences and probably some non-shared environmental influences. So which influence is greater? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it genetics? Or is it the different types of environmental influences? Now, these twin studies, they can shed a light on the degree of influence. If they're more influenced by genetics, the identical twins will be highly, highly similar, right? So monozygotic twins, identical twins, in terms of intelligence, in terms of musicality, they'll probably be highly similar if that trait is very much influenced by genetics. Whereas dizygotic twins, right, fraternal twins, they'll be a lot less similar. Now, if that trait or that aptitude is influenced more by the environment, the identical twins will show moderate similarity. They won't show that high similarity as when it's something that's, highly influenced by genetics. So if it's influenced more by the environment, both the identical twins and the fraternal twins will show only moderate similarity. So, what have these twin studies shown in terms of creative ability, creative aptitudes, right? Are they more subject to nature? Are they more heritable? Or are they more subject to contextual influences, to the environment? Let's see what the twin studies show. So there's a lot of different aptitudes that comprise the construct of creativity, the phenomenon that we call creativity. And one of them is originality. Now, twin studies on the heritability of originality show approximately 25% of that ability is genetically dictated, whereas approximately 38% is influenced by shared environmental influences, and 37% is the result of non-shared environmental influences. Now, if we take a look at this and we do the math, you could see here that approximately 75% of originality as a cognitive ability, right, is influenced by the environment, by a mix of shared and non-shared environmental influences, whereas 25%, roughly a quarter, is dictated by genetics. Now, that shows that, okay, at least like a modest or moderate amount is related to our genetics, but a large part is related to the environment. Now, that is quite a bit lower than many other cognitive abilities. For example, even general intelligence is quite a bit higher. Now, another group of twin studies have been on achievement, creative achievement. Creative achievement is the propensity that individuals have to be creatively successful, to produce creative artifacts, to make creative things, and to be successful in creative domains and disciplines and endeavors. So twin studies on the heritability of creative achievement show a 0.54 correlation on achievement between identical twins, but only a 0.06 correlation between fraternal twins. That shows a really big difference. Now, identical twins here showed approximately 50% similarity in terms of achievement. So, that's quite a substantial amount. But in terms of fraternal twins, twins that share only 50%, wow, only 0.06 of a correlation. So that shows a substantial genetic influence on creative achievement. There is a heritable component at play here. So what do these twin studies suggest on whole? What can we infer? Well, they suggest that creativity results from an interaction between genetic and environmental influences. And we can infer on whole, because of this, that creativity is an aptitude, right? It's an aptitude, it's a natural ability. And that it's a natural ability that has varying genetic influence, right? So people are kind of born with varying degrees or levels of creativity as an aptitude. But these levels, regardless of what they are, whether they're average, low, or high, can be developed and are substantially influenced by the context, by the environment, by things like learning, by things like practicing, and by having individuals in our environments who can help us, like coaches and teachers and parents and friends, right? So, this demonstrates that creativity, in part, is subject to nature and in part subject to nurture. It's an interaction between the two, just like many other aptitudes, right? Just like many other abilities and talents. Now, how are these aptitudes, how is creativity developed? Right? What are the best ways to develop it? This is something that we're going to explore in a subsequent video.